My sister demanded that I pay for her wedding, so I sent the bill to her irresponsible fiancé. In our family, I was always the responsible one, the person who worked hard, paid the bills, and showed up whenever someone needed help. My younger sister Lisa was the opposite, carefree, extravagant, and completely unaware of the concept of budgeting. One evening, she called me, her voice bubbling with excitement. She was getting married and had grand plans for a dream wedding. As she described the venue, the dress, the flowers, and the live band, I listened, already sensing where this was heading. Eventually, she brought up the budget. This wasn't going to be a simple wedding. It was a full-scale event, a statement. The total cost, around $50,000. That number made me pause. Lisa certainly couldn't afford it, and I doubted her fiancé, Travis, could either. When I asked how they planned to pay for everything, Lisa didn't hesitate. She expected me to cover the entire thing. It wasn't a request. She spoke as if it were obvious, as if being her older brother automatically made me the financial sponsor of her big day. She saw it as a duty, something I should do just because I had the means. For a moment, I was speechless. Lisa had always relied on others to solve her problems, but this was a new level of entitlement. She didn't ask if I was willing, she simply assumed I'd say yes. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became to her. I wasn't just a brother, I was a safety net, a walking wallet she could turn to whenever life got inconvenient. But this time, things were going to be different. When I refused to pay, Lisa was furious. She accused me of being selfish, of turning my back on her during the most important day of her life. For her, this wasn't about money. It was about family, about doing the right thing. And of course, I was the one expected to step up. She didn't back down. Instead, she tried to justify why neither she nor Travis could afford the wedding. Apparently, Travis was still finding himself. He had big dreams and huge ambitions, just no current income. According to Lisa, he had an entrepreneurial spirit and was working on a business idea that was going to take off any day now. In the meantime, he was between jobs, picking up small gigs here and there. Nothing steady. It didn't take much to read between the lines. Travis was unemployed, living off Lisa, and had no concrete plans to change that. When I asked why he couldn't contribute anything, Lisa got defensive. She listed all the ways Travis was a great partner, supportive, loving, full of potential. She insisted that once his business succeeded, they'd be incredibly successful. I'd heard this story before, the classic, he's not broke, he's a future million, the type of guy who always had excuses for not working, not saving, not contributing, but plenty of time to sit around making plans that never came to life. Lisa had convinced herself that Travis was the one, and nothing, not even something as basic as financial responsibility, was going to get in the way of her fairy tale. And she fully expected me to pick up the slack. When emotional pressure didn't work, she brought in reinforcements. Our parents. The next day, I got a call from my mother. Her tone was that familiar mix of concern and disappointment she used whenever she wanted me to do something I didn't want to do. She started by asking how I was, how work was going, but it didn't take long to get to the real reason. Lisa had told her everything. According to my mother, I was being unreasonable. Lisa was my only sister, and family helps family. This wasn't about the money, it was about showing support, about making sure Lisa had the wedding she deserved. That word, deserved, made me pause. Since when did a $55,000 luxury wedding become something someone deserved? I asked if Lisa and Travis had even considered a smaller wedding. My mother sounded offended, like I'd suggested something absurd. A wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event, she said. Lisa's dreamed of this day her whole life. Are you really going to ruin it for her? The guilt trip was in full swing. Then came the final blow. My father got on the phone. He was less emotional, and more logical. I had a good job, a stable income, helping out wouldn't even make a dent in my savings. What's a little money, he said, for your own sister's happiness? I'd heard all this before. Every time Lisa got herself into trouble, car payments, credit card debt, emergencies, the family turned to me to fix it. And every time it was framed as my responsibility, because I was doing okay, and Lisa needed help. But this wasn't an emergency, this wasn't a necessity, this was a wedding. I told them no, again, and this time, I heard the shift in their voices. The warmth disappeared, frustration took over. They couldn't understand why I was being so difficult. My mother even suggested that I might be jealous that Lisa was getting married before me. That's when I knew there was no reasoning with them. They had already decided that I was the villain in this story, and that was fine. Let them think whatever they want, because I had already made up my mind too. If they thought I was being selfish before, they had no idea what was coming next. He stormed out, leaving Lisa standing there humiliated, and me calmly observing the aftermath. Her perfect fairy tale was crumbling right before her eyes, and for once I wasn't the one who had to save it. I smiled to myself, satisfied. The whole scenario had played out just as I had hoped. I wasn't going to be the one to shoulder the burden of their irresponsibility any longer. As the chaos unfolded around me, I couldn't help but enjoy the spectacle, guests whispering in confusion, Lisa's carefully constructed world collapsing, and Travis realizing, far too late, the weight of the debt he was now tied to. Lisa stormed up to me, fury radiating from her. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded, her voice trembling with rage. "You ruined everything." I simply shrugged. "I didn't ruin anything, Lisa. This is all on you." Travis, meanwhile, had gone from panic to anger. His face was red, his eyes wide with disbelief. "How could you do this? Why didn't you tell me it was all in my name?" He was yelling now, the reality of the situation hitting him like a freight train. Lisa tried to defend herself, throwing all the blame on me, but Travis wasn't having it. "Are you insane?" he shouted. "You let them put everything in my name. I'm drowning in debt now." The argument grew louder, drawing the attention of all the guests. Some pretended to be absorbed in their food, but I could see the eyes of those around us. They were watching the drama unfold like a live soap opera. Lisa's perfect day was spiraling into disaster, and there was nothing she could do to fix it. Our parents, as usual, tried to intervene, but Travis wasn't interested in their usual appeals. He wasn't looking for family solidarity, he was looking for accountability, and it was clear to him that Lisa had failed him. With a final angry glance at her, Travis stormed out of the reception, leaving Lisa standing there, looking utterly defeated. And me, I took a slow sip of my champagne and adjusted my tie. I had done what needed to be done. I had stayed true to my principles, and stopped enabling Lisa's reckless behavior. For once I wasn't the one who had to clean up her mess. Over the next few days I was bombarded with texts and calls. Lisa in tears, our mother angry, and our father attempting to appeal to my sense of duty. But I stood firm. I had already made up my mind. The consequences of their actions were theirs to bear, not mine. I didn't regret it, not for a second. Lisa's fairy tale may have been shattered, but maybe that's what she needed. Maybe the only way she could learn was to experience the real world, without me as her safety net. The best thing I could do for her was to let her face the consequences of her decision, and for once I didn't have to play the role of the one who always fixed everything. In the end, Lisa's relationship with Travis didn't survive. The financial strain, the trust issues, and the weight of that mountain of debt were too much for them. And as for me, I moved on with my life, knowing that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is let them figure things out on their own. I finished my champagne, left a tip for the waiter, and walked out with the most satisfied feeling in the world. I had done exactly what Lisa expected me to do. I had paid for her wedding, just not in the way she wanted. By the next morning my phone was flooded with messages, angry ones. Lisa had gone into full meltdown mode, sending furious texts about how I had ruined her life. According to her, I had embarrassed her in front of her guests, humiliated Travis, and destroyed her future. She ranted about how she had spent months planning this wedding, how it was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, and how I had turned it into a complete disaster. I scrolled through her wall of messages, barely suppressing a smirk. She still didn't get it. Lisa wasn't angry because of the debt. She wasn't even angry about Travis blowing up at her. She was angry because for the first time in her life, she had to face the consequences of her own choices, and she had no idea how to handle it. Travis, on the other hand, had completely lost it. Apparently, once the reality of the financial situation fully sank in, he exploded. He demanded answers, asking Lisa how she could have been so irresponsible. She tried to shift the blame onto me, claiming I had tricked her. But Travis wasn't stupid. "You let them put everything in my name. What the hell is wrong with you?" That was the last thing anyone saw of him at the wedding. He stormed out, leaving Lisa standing there, humiliated in front of all her guests. Now 24 hours later, Their entire relationship was hanging by a thread. Our parents weren't far behind Lisa in their outrage. My mother left 3 long voicemails about how disappointed she was in me. She said I had shamed the family, that I had taken things too far, that Lisa had been looking forward to this day her entire life. My father's message was shorter but just as ridiculous. He said that no matter what had happened, it was my duty as Lisa's older brother to fix this. Fix it. I almost laughed out loud. I had already fixed the real problem. I had broken the cycle. Lisa had spent her whole life expecting other people to pick up the pieces for her. This time she was left to deal with the mess alone. And Travis, I wasn't surprised to hear that he wasn't answering her calls. Rumors were already spreading that he was considering walking away from the marriage entirely. He had no interest in starting his life saddled with a mountain of debt over a wedding he barely had a say in. As for me, I didn't bother replying to any of them. I didn't call Lisa back. I didn't respond to my parents' guilt-tripping. Instead, I turned off my phone, poured myself a drink, and sat on my balcony, breathing in the cool night air. For the first time in years I felt completely free. Lisa had wanted a dream wedding, but now she was living a real-life nightmare, and the best part, it had nothing to do with me anymore. A week had passed since the wedding disaster, and for the first time in years, my life felt peaceful. Lisa had finally stopped bombarding me with messages, though not before sending one last rant about how I had betrayed her, and how I would regret this one day. I left her on. I had nothing to say to her anymore. From what I heard through family gossip, she and Travis were officially over. Apparently after a few days of arguing, Travis realized he had no future with someone who would willingly put him in tens of thousands of dollars of debt. He packed his bags and left her to deal with the financial mess alone. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Meanwhile, my parents were still trying to fix things. They called a few more times, their tone softer than before, now trying to gain sympathy rather than guilt-tripping me. Lisa is really struggling right now, you know. She's devastated. Don't you think you've made your point? I couldn't help but laugh at that. Made my point? No, Lisa had done that herself. She had dug this hole, not me. And for the first time in her life, no one was offering her a way out. I knew exactly what my parents wanted. They wanted me to swoop in at the last moment, like I always did, and clean up the mess. They wanted me to feel sorry for Lisa, to help her get back on her feet, but I didn't, not because I was being cruel, not because I didn't care, but because I had finally learned something important. Helping someone who refuses to help themselves isn't kindness, it's enabling. Lisa had spent her whole life expecting others to bail her out. Not this time. I had already done my part. I had given her exactly what she wanted. A wedding. A grand, luxurious, unforgettable wedding. Just not the ending she had hoped for. So, I ignored the calls. I ignored the messages. Instead, I focused on my own life. For the first time, I wasn't worried about how much money I had to set aside in case Lisa needed something. I wasn't answering desperate family calls asking for financial help. I was finally free. One evening, as I sat on my balcony with a drink in hand, I watched the city lights flicker around me. The weight that had been on my shoulders for years was finally gone. Lisa got the wedding of her dreams, in a way, but she never expected the lesson that came with. And as for me, I had never felt more at peace. Life sometimes throws challenges at us that seem impossible to escape. But what if these challenges aren't a punishment, but an opportunity for growth? I spent a long time asking myself this question, as I watched the people around me struggle with their problems, not realizing that they were the ones creating them. All these troubles, these endless attempts to do something that yields no result, they are a kind of trap, from which it seems there is no way out. But there is always a way out, and I realized this after many years. When I was younger, I believed that helping people was natural. It was what we should do. After all, we all live in the same world, and by helping someone else, you are making their life easier. It sounded logical, and I truly believed that in doing so, I was bringing benefit to those around me. But as I began to grow older and face real difficulties, it became clear to me that sometimes help is not only ineffective, but also destructive. At first it wasn't obvious. I helped friends who got into difficult situations, tried to support my family when they had financial problems. I did it with good intentions, because who doesn't want to help their loved ones, right? But over time I noticed something interesting. The people I helped became increasingly dependent on my help, and it seemed they expected it to always be there. They began to take my support for granted, forgetting that I too had my limits.
When I realized that I couldn't keep solving other people's problems endlessly, I had to make a choice: continue playing the role of the rescuer, or stop interfering in others' lives to avoid getting trapped. It wasn't easy. The people I loved were disappointed. They didn't understand why I suddenly stopped helping, but I began to realize that true help doesn't always mean doing something for someone else. Sometimes, the best way to help is to let them find their own way. This realization came to me when my sister found herself in a tough spot. She lost her job, had problems in her personal life, and needed a place to recover. And while I could have given her money or helped with housing, I knew that would only delay the resolution of her problem. My sister had always relied on me, but she hadn't learned to solve her own problems. And this time, I stepped back. I offered her support, but not in the form of financial help. I offered her emotional support, but not by doing everything for her. This decision turned out to be difficult, but it became a turning point in my life. I realized that people must learn to deal with difficulties on their own. Otherwise, they will never truly become independent, and perhaps that was the most important thing I could give her. I didn't immediately realize how deeply these changes would affect my life. When I stopped solving other people's problems, I finally started paying attention to my own goals and desires. I began to live my life, no longer looking back at those who tried to use me. It was liberating. I stopped feeling obligated to save others, and at some point I realized that this didn't make me a bad person. On the contrary, it helped me to become better. As the years passed, I began to understand that many people keep making the same mistakes because they are unwilling to learn from them. They look for shortcuts and are ready to shift responsibility onto others, if possible. But I've learned to accept that each person is responsible for their own life, and if they are not ready to change, no one can help them with that. The path to understanding this wasn't easy. There were times when I felt guilty for not helping as I had before, but each time I reminded myself, if I continue to intervene, I won't give people the chance to change. Sometimes, true care is not about solving someone else's problems, but allowing them to handle them on their own. In the end, I realized that help isn't always a solution. Sometimes, it's simply an opportunity for someone else to learn how to be strong. And when I learned to let go, I felt like my life finally became truly my own.